the shadows of a vast music room, a maid's daughter shared a secret melody with the blind heir, unaware the boy's powerful father was watching every note. A melody, fragile and hesitant, echoed from the empty music room. Billionaire Robert Miller stopped. He knew his blind son's playing, technically flawless and utterly cold. This music was different. It held a sorrow so profound it made the air feel heavy. He found his son, not alone, but taking instruction from the 10-year-old maid's daughter. She wasn't teaching him notes. She was teaching him feeling. Robert had spent a fortune trying to buy his son this gift, and this child held the key. This isn't just a story about music. It's the story of how a father's ruthless calculation and a mother's desperate choice created a secret that would either save them or destroy them all. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. Enjoy the story. A 10-year-old girl sat at a piano, her hands raw from scrubbing floors. This was not her piano. She was the maid's daughter, waiting for her mother in the empty music room of the richest school in the state. The melody was impossible. Robert Miller stopped dead in the silent, polished hallway of Crestwood Academy. It was past 9 at night. The air was still and smelled faintly of lemon wax and old money. Every student was gone. Every teacher had retreated to their comfortable homes. The only sound should have been the low, electric hum of the building's security system. But this was a piano. It was coming from the West Wing music room, his son's music room. Robert knew his son's playing by heart. He had paid for every note of it. Ethan's playing was technical, precise, and utterly flawless. It was also cold. It was the sound of a perfect machine reciting a difficult formula. This music was different. It was hesitant, fragile. Then, it blossomed into a sorrow so profound it made the air in the hallway feel heavy. It was a sound of longing. It was a sound Robert had never heard his blind son make. A flash of sharp annoyance tightened Robert's jaw. He had left Ethan in that room an hour ago. He had a thermos of lukewarm tea and his braille sheet music. Robert was chairing an emergency board meeting in the Miller Tower. It was a sleek, glass-walled annex his own company had funded. His son's nanny had called in sick. Robert was forced to bring Ethan along. It was not ideal, but the music room was a controlled environment. It was safe. It was quiet. It was not, however, supposed to be occupied by anyone else. Robert strode toward the light spilling into the hall. His expensive leather shoes made no sound on the plush runner. He was ready to dismiss whoever had dared to disturb his son. But as he reached the doorway, the sight inside made his breath catch. There was Ethan, his son, sitting at the $200,000 piano. His usual stiff, perfect posture was gone. His shoulders were relaxed. His head was tilted, as if listening to a secret. But he was not alone. Seated beside him on the bench was a small, blonde girl. She wore worn-out jeans and a faded t-shirt. Robert recognized her instantly. She was the new maid's daughter, Susan Walker's girl. He had seen her trailing her mother in the staff hallways. A child who did not belong here. The girl was not playing. She was whispering, her voice a soft, steady murmur. "No, not like that," the girl said. Her voice was clear. "Don't just hit the keys, Ethan. That's just noise. Press them, like you're leaving a footprint in wet sand. Feel the note go all the way down to the floor." Ethan's fingers, usually so tense, hovered over the keys. He pressed a single chord. It shimmered with a feeling Robert did not know his son possessed. "That's better," the girl said. "Now this next part. The slow part. What does it sound like to you?" "It sounds sad," Ethan whispered. "It is sad," the girl agreed. She tucked her blonde hair behind her ear. "But it's a good sad. My great-uncle Elias, he was in a war. He taught me how to play on his old, broken piano. He said this part sounds like waiting." Ethan turned his head toward her, his sightless eyes wide with curiosity. "Waiting for what?" "The all clear," Chloe said softly. He said the bravest men he knew weren't the ones who charged. They were the ones who could sit still in the dark and just wait. When it's too quiet, and you're scared, but you know you just have to get through it. That's this part of the song. It's the waiting. Can you play the waiting? Ethan played the phrase again. This time, it was not just a series of notes. It was a story. It was patient. It was heavy. It was beautiful. Robert Miller stood frozen in the darkness of the hall. He was a man who controlled a global logistics empire. He managed thousands of employees and billions of dollars in assets. He was reduced to a spy, listening to a 10-year-old girl. He watched her small, unmanicured hand hover near Ethan's, but never touch. She was guiding him with her words alone. She was not teaching him technique. Robert paid a man named Peterson a small fortune to do that. Mr. Peterson, with his conservatory pedigree, drilled scales and timing into Ethan until all the life was gone. This child, she was teaching him feeling. She was translating music into a language of sense and memory. It was a language his son, who lived in a world of darkness, was fluent in. For a moment, Robert's instinct was to stride in. He wanted to reclaim control, to demand an explanation. This was a breach of protocol, a security risk, but he remained rooted to the spot. He was held captive by the scene. He had spent a fortune on specialists. He paid for the best instructors in the country. He did it all in a desperate attempt to give his son an advantage, a skill that would make people forget his deficiency. He had bought him the finest piano. He had enrolled him in the most prestigious school. He had scheduled every minute of Ethan's life to foster a talent that might give him an edge. Nothing had worked. Ethan remained a beautiful, perfectly tuned instrument that no one knew how to play. And here was the maid's daughter, a girl whose name he didn't even know. She was unlocking a part of his son's soul Robert had never been allowed to see. Suddenly, the music stopped. A woman rushed into the room, her face pale with panic. It was the mother, Susan Walker. She wore the drab gray uniform of the Crestwood cleaning staff. "Chloe, what are you doing? I told you to wait by the cart." Susan's voice was a frantic whisper. She was wringing her hands in her apron. "You cannot be in here. You cannot touch things. Oh, goodness. Ethan, Mr. Miller's son. We have to go. We have to go now." She grabbed Chloe's hand. The girl looked confused. "But Mom, we were just dash." "Now, Chloe. I mean it." Susan practically dragged her daughter toward the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she finally saw the tall, imposing figure standing in the shadows. Susan Walker froze. All the color drained from her face. She looked like a mouse that had just run into a hawk. "Mr. Miller," she breathed. Her voice was choked with terror. "Sir, I am so sorry. She just loves the piano. She didn't mean any harm. I was just cleaning the classrooms. It won't happen again. I promise, sir. It will never, ever happen again." Robert looked at the terrified woman. He looked at the small girl hiding behind her mother's legs. Then his gaze went past them, to his son, who was sitting alone at the piano bench, his head bowed. Robert Miller said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the long, empty hall. He left the mother and daughter trembling in the silence. The next morning, Robert was in his office on the 80th floor of the Miller Dynamics Tower. The sun had not yet risen over the city, but he had been there for an hour. He did not look at the panoramic view. His focus was on a single, encrypted email he was typing. The recipient was Frank. Frank was the discreet and unervingly efficient head of his corporate security team. "Frank," the message read, "I need a comprehensive report on a staff member at Crestwood Academy. Name is Susan Walker. She's on the custodial team. I want to know everything. Employment history, financials, family. Specifically, her daughter, the blonde one. I want to know where she learned to play. I need it by noon." He hit send. The click of the key was the only sound in the vast, silent office. His 10 o'clock meeting was with Dean Hardwick. Hardwick was the new headmaster of Crestwood Academy. He was a man who seemed assembled from a catalog of expensive East Coast accessories. He had perfect teeth, a watch worth more than a small car, and an ambition so sharp you could almost see it. "Robert, a pleasure," Hardwick said, gesturing to a leather chair in his needlessly large office. "Thank you for making the time. I know what the CEO of a company like Miller Dynamics deals with daily. The school is a priority investment, Dean," Robert said. He cut through the pleasantries. "What's on the agenda?" Hardwick's smile widened. "The Legacy Gala. It's in 6 weeks. This year, I want it to be spectacular. We're courting the Henderson Foundation for the new Miller Center for Global Strategy. I want to put on a show that reminds them why Crestwood is the premier academy in the country." He slid a glossy brochure across his desk. "And to that end, I was hoping Ethan would perform." Robert looked at him, his face impassive. "He performs at the winter recital every year." "Yes, but this is different. I don't want a simple student performance. I want a showpiece. The centerpiece of the evening. We have him listed in the program as a prodigy. I want him to play something that proves it. Something breathtaking." The pressure was immediate and unwelcome. Hardwick was not asking as an educator. He was leveraging Robert's blind son as a fundraising tool. It was a game Robert understood. It was a game he usually played better than anyone. But today, the thought of Ethan on a stage, playing a technically flawless but emotionally empty piece for a room of investors, felt like a failure. It felt like the cold, precise notes he had always heard. It was not the music he had heard last night. "I'll speak with his tutor," Robert said noncommittally. "Excellent." Hardwick beamed. "We're all counting on him. On you." As Robert was leaving, he was forced to pause. His regular tutor, Mr. Peterson, was just arriving for Ethan's lesson. Mr. Miller, a word? Peterson was a thin man with a perpetually pinched expression. "I'm busy, Peterson. It's about Ethan. The gala. Dean Hardwick informed me. I must be frank, Robert. The boy's technique is solid, but his interpretation, it's juvenile. He lacks the emotional maturity for the piece Hardwick has selected. And you're the man to fix that." Robert asked, his voice flat. "I am, but it will require discipline, more lessons, fewer distractions. He seems unfocused lately." Robert thought of the maid's daughter. "I'll see to it he's focused. Do your job." Robert decided to stay. He wanted to see his investment in action. He stood in the back of the music room, a silent, intimidating presence. The lesson was a disaster. "No, no," Peterson snapped, his voice sharp. He rapped a pencil on the piano lid. "The timing, Ethan. You are dragging the allegro. It must be precise. From the top." Ethan's shoulders tensed. He began again. His fingers flew across the keys in a technically perfect but utterly lifeless cascade of notes. "Better," Peterson conceded. "But there is no feeling. You are a gifted child, Ethan, but you play like an automaton. You must connect with the composer's intent." I don't know what he intended," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. "Then you must study," the man retorted. "It is all here. The notations, the dynamics. It is a formula, Ethan, not a guessing game. It is math." Now again, from the top. Robert watched his son shrink on the bench. His face was pale. His hands were trembling slightly. The joy, the tentative, curious expression Robert had seen the night before, it was gone. It was replaced by a familiar mask of anxious obedience. Robert had seen enough. This was not a rescue mission. This was an acquisition. His son's spirit was the prize. The sterile, by-the-book methods of the world he had built were failing. The janitor's daughter, with her talk of war stories and footprints in the sand, was succeeding. He couldn't let Hardwick's ambition or Peterson's rigid pedagogy destroy the one spark of light he had seen in his son. Later that afternoon, an alert pinged on his laptop. It was the file from Frank. He opened the encrypted attachment. Subject, Susan Walker. Age 38. Status, widowed. Residence, 14B Willow Creek Apartments, West District. Employment, custodial staff, Crestwood Academy, 6 months. Financials, subject is 2 months behind on rent. An eviction notice was served to her address 4 days ago. Robert leaned closer to the screen. Dependents, 1. Chloe Walker. Age 10. Education, attends Northwood Public. Straight A student. Notes. Chloe Walker was informally taught piano by her great-uncle, Elias Thorne. Thorne is a decorated, but highly reclusive, Vietnam veteran. He passed away 6 months ago. Susan and Chloe Walker moved here from Ohio after his death. They have no other family. They have no support system. Robert closed the file. The puzzle was solved. A widow, a daughter, no family, and an eviction notice. He had his leverage. Robert Miller did not get to be a billionaire by waiting for things to happen. He made them happen. He knew he could not approach the girl. She was a child. But the mother was desperate. And a desperate person was a predictable variable. He picked up his phone. He did not call his assistant. He called Dean Hardwick. "Dean," Robert said, "I've been thinking about the gala. I want it to be perfect. I'll need my son to have extra practice time. Late in the evenings. The music room will need to be made available and cleaned properly afterward." "Of course, Robert. Anything. Good. See to it that Susan Walker is the only staff member assigned to the West Wing from 9 to 11 p.m. I don't want my son disturbed." He hung up. He knew Susan's schedule. He knew her fears. Now, he would set the trap. That evening, he did not go to his tower. He went to the gymnasium. It was a cavernous, dark space. The lights were off, save for a single service light in the far corner. The air smelled of sweat and floor polish. He heard the rhythmic squeak of a mop bucket before he saw her. Susan Walker was working alone, her movements tired and mechanical. "Mrs. Walker," Robert said. His voice cut through the vast, empty silence. Susan jumped, letting out a small, terrified gasp. She dropped her mop with a loud clatter. She turned, her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Miller." "Sir." You startled me. I didn't hear you." "We need to talk," Robert said. He did not move closer. He let her stand there, small and isolated in the middle of the basketball court. "Your daughter, Chloe," he said. "She has been interfering with my son's practice." Susan turned white. "Sir, I promise, it will never happen again. I told her she is not to go near the music room." "I am so sorry, Dash." "On the contrary," Robert interrupted. "It will happen every night." Susan stared at him, her brow furrowed in utter confusion. "Sir, I don't understand." "It's a simple proposal, Mrs. Walker. Your daughter. She will teach my son." "Teach?" Susan looked horrified. "Sir, no. She's just a child. She's not a teacher. She just plays things her uncle taught her. She doesn't know what she's doing. Mr. Peterson is his teacher." "Mr. Peterson is teaching him to be a machine," Robert said. "Your daughter is teaching him to be a musician. I want what she has. I want her to give it to my son. She will prepare him for the legacy gala." "Oh, no, sir. I can't. We can't." Susan was shaking her head, backing away. "Mr. Hardwick, the rules. It's not right. She has her own schoolwork. Please, sir. We need this job." Robert's patience snapped. The time for games was over. "I am not asking you, Mrs. Walker. I am telling you. I have seen your file. 14B Willow Creek Apartments. A very drafty part of town, I imagine. The eviction notice was final, wasn't it?" Susan's hand flew to her mouth. A small, wounded sound escaped her. How did you?" "You will be on the street by Monday," Robert said. His voice was flat, like a hammer striking an anvil. "You and your daughter. Homeless. Winter is coming." He let the words hang in the empty air. "Or," he continued, "your daughter will teach my son. She will meet him every night. She will teach him her stories. She will get him ready for this gala. In return, your troubles will disappear." Susan began to cry. They were silent, terrible tears of pure, helpless terror. She was trapped. What would I tell her?" she whispered. "You will tell her it is a wonderful opportunity. A special job. That I was so impressed with her playing. I am hiring her as Ethan's practice partner. You will tell her she is earning a great privilege. Children like shiny things, Mrs. Walker. Make it shine." He saw the fight go out of her. He saw her shoulders slump in total defeat. "You are asking me to use my daughter," she whispered, her voice full of shame. "I am asking you to be practical," Robert said. "I am offering your child a warm bed to sleep in. All she has to do is play the piano. It is a simple transaction." He waited. The only sound was the drip of the mop into the bucket. "Yes," Susan finally said. The word was a bare thread of a sound. "Yes, sir. We will do it." "I knew you'd be reasonable," Robert said. He turned to leave. "But—" Susan's voice, small but suddenly hard, stopped him. He turned back. "She does it her way," the woman said, wiping her face with her sleeve. She was still terrified, but there was a flicker of new, defiant anger. "No, Mr. Peterson. No schedules. She teaches Ethan. How she teaches him. Those are the terms." Robert considered it for a moment. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Agreed. The deal was struck. A dark pact made in the empty gymnasium. Robert Miller walked out, his mission accomplished. He had secured his asset. He had gotten exactly what he wanted. So why? As he heard the woman's quiet, broken sobs echo behind him, did his victory feel so hollow? The drive home to the Willow Creek Apartments was suffocating. Susan Walker gripped the steering wheel of her sputtering 15-year-old car. Her knuckles were white. The check engine light glowed faintly on the cracked dashboard. It was another problem she couldn't afford to fix. Beside her, Chloe was humming. She was tapping a complex rhythm on her knee. She was a child, and the fear from the encounter with Mr. Miller had already faded, replaced by simple, end-of-day tiredness. "Mom," Chloe asked, her voice small. "Was he mad at me?" Susan's throat tightened. "No, baby. No, not at all. But you were crying." Susan pulled the car into their assigned spot. The apartment building was gray cinder block, bleak and unforgiving in the twilight. She turned off the engine, and the car died with a shudder. She sat in the silence for a long moment, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. In fact, Susan said, forcing a brightness into her voice that felt brittle and false. He was very impressed. Chloe's head snapped up. Her blonde hair caught the dim parking lot light. Impressed? With me? With your playing? Very impressed. Susan took a deep breath. This was the performance of her life. So impressed that he wants to hire you. As a practice partner. For his son. Chloe's eyes went wide. Hire me? Like, for money? Yes. A lot of money, baby. This was the shiny part. The part Robert Miller had told her to use. Enough money that we don't have to worry anymore. About anything. Wow. Chloe processed this. So, I just play piano with Ethan? Like tonight. That's right. You just do what you did tonight. Talk to him. Help him get ready for his big recital. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on Susan's chest. She was pimping out her daughter's kindness. Her child's one, pure gift, inherited from a dead war hero, was now a commodity. A service to be rendered in exchange for a roof over their heads. But what about Mr. Peterson? Chloe asked, her brow furrowing. He's the teacher. I'm not a teacher. Mr. Peterson will handle the technical parts, Susan said, grasping for the words. You are there for the inspiration. Mr. Miller said you have a gift, Chloe. He wants you to share it. Chloe beamed. It was a pure, uncomplicated smile of a 10-year-old who had just been told she was special. The smile broke Susan's heart. Okay, Mom, Chloe said, nodding seriously. I can do that. I'll help him. For us. And for Uncle Elias. He always said music was for sharing, not for keeping locked up. That's my girl, Susan whispered. She pulled her daughter into a desperate hug, burying her face in Chloe's hair. That's my good girl. The next night, Robert Miller was not in the hallway. He was in the school's central security office. Dean Hardwick had given him his own private access code. The school, funded so heavily by Miller Dynamics, was essentially his property. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of a dozen monitors. Robert sat in a leather chair, his suit jacket still on. He had a direct audio and video feed from the West Wing music room. It was crisp, high definition. He could see the dust motes dancing in the light above the piano. He was a ghost in the machine, a silent, all-seeing God in this small, controlled world. At precisely 9:05 p.m., the door to the music room opened. Susan Walker poked her head in first. Her eyes darted around the room, as if she could sense Robert's presence. Ethan, she called softly. Chloe is here. To practice with you. Ethan was already at the bench, his posture rigid. He had been waiting for 10 minutes. Mr. Miller, my father, he said she was coming. Susan ushered Chloe into the room. Chloe was holding a small, worn, cloth-bound book. Well, all right, Susan said, her voice strained. I'll be just down the hall. Cleaning. You two be good. She backed out of the room, pulling the heavy door shut. The lock clicked, a sound of finality. On the monitor, Robert watched the two children. They were alone. For a full minute, neither of them spoke. The silence was loud. Ethan sat facing the keys. Chloe stood awkwardly by the door, dwarfed by the massive, gleaming piano. Finally, Chloe walked over. She didn't sit on the bench. She stood beside it, looking at Ethan. So, she said, the gala. That's a big deal, huh? Ethan nodded, his fingers laced together in his lap. It's for my father's new building. He said it has to be perfect. Perfect, Chloe repeated. The words sounded strange on her tongue. My Uncle Elias. He always said perfect is the enemy of good. He said perfect is a cage. You spend all your time trying not to mess up. You forget to just make the music. Ethan turned his head toward her. His sightless eyes were blank, but his expression was one of deep, ingrained skepticism. Mr. Peterson says there is only one right way. The composer's way. The notes on the page. That's all there is. He's wrong, Chloe said simply. Robert Miller, in his dark room, leaned forward. The girl's simple audacity was astonishing. The notes are just the map, Chloe continued. She tapped the braille sheet music on the stand. This is just directions. It's not the place. You're playing the directions. You're not taking us to the place. Ethan seemed to shrink. I don't know what that means. I don't know how. I can't see the place. You don't have to see it, Chloe said, her voice softening. You have to feel it. Here. She finally slid onto the bench beside him. The bench was built for one, and they were crammed together, their shoulders touching. Robert watched his son flinch at the contact. Ethan was not used to casual, unplanned touch. "What's the piece?" Chloe asked. "Chopin. The heroic Polonaise." "Pola what?" "Polonaise. In A-flat major. Opus 53. Chloe blinked. "Okay, that sounds hard." "It is," Ethan said. "It's very fast here. And the octaves in the left hand. They're supposed to be like cannon fire. Mr. Peterson says mine sound like raindrops." "Cannon fire," Chloe mused. She opened the cloth-bound book she'd brought. It was a tattered, old journal. "My Uncle Elias wrote stuff down. Stories. For his music." Robert zoomed one of the cameras in on the book. It was filled with a man's messy, slanted handwriting. "He told me. War isn't just explosions," Chloe read softly, tracing the words with her finger. "He said the scariest part wasn't the noise. It was the ground. Shaking. He said you felt it in your bones, before you even heard it. A rumble. Like a giant, angry giant was walking toward you, miles away." She looked at Ethan. "Maybe it's not cannon fire. Maybe it's the rumble. Before the cannon. Can you play that? Don't use your fingers. Use your whole arm. From your shoulder. Make the piano shake. Just one note." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Just one note. Just one. The lowest one you can find. Make it rumble." Ethan was clearly confused. This was not a lesson. This was a game. But he was trapped. His father had ordered this. He slowly moved his left hand to the far end of the keyboard. He played a single, low note. It was timid. Plink. "Nope," Chloe said. "That was a raindrop. I mean it. Make it rumble. Like the giant." Ethan took a breath. He repositioned his hand. He put the weight of his small shoulder into it. He struck the key. Boom. The note was a growl. It was a deep, resonant sound that filled the room, so loud and sudden it made Robert jump in his security chair. The microphone feed crackled slightly. Ethan's head snapped back, his mouth open in a small O of surprise. He had never made the piano make a sound like that. Chloe grinned. "See? A rumble. Now, can you do that, but with the notes? The fast part." It's too fast," Ethan stammered. "Who cares about fast?" Chloe said. "Play it slow. Play the rumble. Play the giant walking. I don't care about the notes. I care about the giant." Robert Miller watched, mesmerized. This was chaos. This was madness. It was an unstructured, childish, emotional mess. It was everything he had built his life and his company to oppose. Logic, structure, and precision were his tools. He watched his son. Ethan's face was a mask of concentration. He placed his left hand for the infamous octave passage. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He began to play. It was not the Polonaise. Not as Chopin wrote it. It was slow. It was plodding. But it was terrifying. Each octave was a heavy, deliberate footstep. The piano, that $200,000 symbol of sterile perfection, was vibrating with a deep, menacing power. Ethan was not just playing notes. He was doing exactly what the girl had said. He was playing a giant. Robert felt a chill run up his spine. His son, his timid, anxious, obedient son, was channeling a pure, controlled rage into the music. "Good," Chloe whispered, her voice intense. "That's it. Keep him walking. Don't let him stop. He's coming." Ethan played the passage. Again and again, each time a little faster. But the weight, the power, the rumble, remained. It was no longer raindrops. It was cannon fire. After 5 minutes, Ethan's arm was shaking. He stopped, panting. It's heavy," he said, breathing hard. "It's supposed to be," Chloe said. "It's a war, right? A heroic polo thing. Wars are heavy." Ethan was silent for a moment. He flexed his fingers. Then, he did something Robert had never seen him do. He smiled. It was not a polite, rehearsed smile for an adult. It was a small, secret, genuine smile of discovery. "What else does the book say?" Ethan asked. Robert sat back in his chair. The dark, cold room felt different, somehow. He was a man who bought and sold companies based on cold, hard data. He looked at profit margins, at logistics, at efficiencies. This had no data. It had no logic. And it was the first time his multi-million-dollar investment in his son's talent had shown any real return. The girl, the maid's daughter. She was not a teacher. She was a key. She was unlocking rooms in his son that Robert didn't even know existed. His ruthless, calculated, black-hearted maneuver had worked. It had worked perfectly. A new, colder calculation entered his mind. The gala was in 6 weeks. Peterson, with his rigid methods, would never get this result. He would drill the rumble right out of him. He had to protect his investment. He picked up his phone. He sent a text message to his personal assistant. Cancel all of Mr. Ethan's lessons with Mr. Peterson. Effective immediately. Tell him, a family emergency. Tell him whatever you want. He is not to go near my son until after the gala. He hit send. In the music room, Chloe was now playing a simple melody with one hand, a folk tune Robert didn't recognize. This was Uncle Elias's go-to-sleep song, she said. He said after all the noise, you needed a song to put the quiet back in. Ethan listened, his head tilted. Then, his right hand found the keys. He began to play the melody with her, in harmony. Robert Miller sat alone in the dark, watching the two children play. He had won. He had secured the gala performance. But as he listened to the simple, haunting melody of the go-to-sleep song, he felt a strange, unwelcome ache in his own chest. It was a feeling of profound, absolute loneliness. The next 3 weeks settled into a strange, secret rhythm. The west wing of Crestwood Academy became an island after dark. At one end of the hall, Susan Walker would clean the same stretch of corridor, her cart a lonely sentinel. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She was a guard, disguised as a maid. At the other end, in the music room, a friendship was being built, one note at a time. Robert Miller watched it all. He sat in his sterile security room, a silent partner to the proceedings. He had canceled 3 international business trips. He told his board it was to oversee the final preparations for the Miller Center. In truth, he was glued to the monitor. The show he was watching was better than any data projection. Okay, so this part, Chloe said, tapping the sheet music. It was their 4th session. This part is fast and shiny. It sounds like a parade, but a fancy one. Ethan had been playing the middle section of the Polonaise. It was technically brilliant, but it was still just a cascade of notes. Mr. Peterson said it's a procession of Polish nobility, Ethan recited. Chloe made a face. Nobility? What does that even mean? It just sounds stuck up. Robert, alone in his room, almost choked on his water. The girl was irreverent. She was 10. Uncle Elias wrote about parades, Chloe said, flipping through her journal. He said when they came home, there was a big one. He said it wasn't about the fancy uniforms. It was about the feeling of finally winning, like you'd been holding your breath for a year, and you could finally let it all out at once. A big whoosh of we made it. She looked at Ethan. Can you play that? Not a procession. Can you play the big whoosh? Ethan thought for a moment. He tilted his head. A whoosh. Yeah, like you just won the biggest race of your life. And everyone is cheering. And you're tired, but you're so happy. Your chest feels big. Ethan placed his hands on the keys. He started the section again. Robert watched, his eyes narrowed. He was listening for the change. At first, it was the same. Precise. Fast. Then, Ethan's shoulders straightened. He leaned into the keys, a new kind of confidence in his touch. The tempo surged, not just with speed, but with joy. The music became bright. It was exuberant. It was the sound of a flag unfurling in a strong wind. It was, Robert had to admit, the sound of a whoosh. When Ethan finished the phrase, he was breathing fast, a wide, uncontrolled grin on his face. Was that it? He panted. That was it. Chloe cheered, bouncing on the bench. That was totally it. Ethan's grin faded, replaced by a look of sudden, profound confusion. Chloe, he whispered. Yeah. My hands aren't shaking. Robert zoomed the camera in. Ethan was holding his hands out. Robert knew those hands. He knew the fine, persistent tremor that always plagued his son, especially after a difficult lesson. The anxiety. The tremor was gone. His hands were perfectly, absolutely steady. Why would they be shaking? Chloe asked, confused. You're just playing music. You're just playing music. The simplicity of the statement struck Robert. For Ethan, music had never been just music. It was a test. It was a burden. It was the measure of his worth. It was the thing he had to do to earn his father's clipped, formal approval. Now, it was just a whoosh. Robert leaned back, a deep, unsettling feeling moving through him. He was a man who understood transactions. He had paid for a result. The result was being delivered. But the girl, She wasn't fulfilling a contract. She had no idea she was being paid. She thought she was helping. She was giving his son this gift for free. The transaction was dirty. The result was pure. This contradiction was a piece of data that did not fit his models. Meanwhile, Susan Walker was living in a new, gilded cage. On the Monday of the second week, a crisp, white envelope had been slipped under her apartment door. Not a court summons. Not an eviction notice. It was a cashier's check. For 3 months' rent. There was no note. No sender. A week later, the principal of Chloe's underfunded public school called. An anonymous local benefactor had set up a grant. It would cover all costs for lunches, school supplies, and field trips for Chloe for the entire year. Susan knew. She knew it was Robert Miller's blood money. Every time she paid her rent, she felt sick. Every time Chloe came home, thrilled that she could get the good, hot lunch instead of the free cheese sandwich, Susan had to turn away, her eyes stinging. She was a good mother. She was keeping her daughter safe. She was keeping a roof over her head. She was also a liar. She was using her own child. She was a pawn in a rich man's game. The two facts could not exist together, yet they did. The cognitive dissonance was eating her alive. She saw Mr. Miller, from a distance, several times. He would be walking the halls of Crestwood, usually with Dean Hardwick, pointing at blueprints, discussing the new Miller Center. He never once looked at her. His cold, terrifying focus in the gymnasium had been replaced by a complete, chilling indifference. She was a problem solved, a tool that was functioning as designed. He did not need to look at the hammer. He just needed it to hit the nail. This was worse. This invisibility confirmed her status. She was nothing. The tension snapped on a cold Thursday night, 2 weeks before the gala. Robert was in his usual spot, the monitor's glow painting his face blue. Ethan and Chloe were in the middle of a breakthrough. Chloe was trying to explain the quiet, lyrical part of the piece. "This is the part after the parade," Chloe was saying. Uncle Elias said, "This was the part where you're alone. And you just, remember, the people who didn't come home." Ethan was playing it with a new, heartbreaking tenderness. The music was so soft, Robert had to turn up the volume on his feed. Then, a new figure appeared on a different monitor. The one for the West Wing Hall. Dean Hardwick. Robert sat bolt upright. Hardwick was walking down the hall, his posture self-important. He was clearly making his rounds. Robert watched, his heart suddenly hammering in his chest. A feeling so alien, he almost didn't recognize it. It was panic. The entire, delicate, secret arrangement was about to be blown to pieces. On the monitor, Robert saw Susan. She was at the far end of the hall, mopping. She saw Hardwick. Her entire body went rigid. Hardwick was halfway to the music room. He was going to hear the piano. He was going to walk in. He would see Ethan. And he would see the maid's daughter. The fallout would be catastrophic. Hardwick would feel that Robert had gone behind his back. The carefully constructed narrative of Ethan's prodigy status would be revealed as a fraud, propped up by a 10-year-old. Peterson would have to be brought back. The girl would be fired. Susan would be ruined. And Ethan? Robert thought of his son's hands. Steady. Happy. This could not happen. Robert's hand shot to his phone. He could call Hardwick. He could invent an emergency. But it was too late. Hardwick was 20 feet from the door. Then, Susan Walker moved. She shoved her mop and bucket aside. The clatter echoed in the hall. Dean Hardwick. "Sir." Her voice was sharp, laced with a panic so real it was almost brilliant. Hardwick stopped, annoyed at the interruption. He turned to the flustered maid. "Yes? What is it, Mrs. Walker?" "Susan Walker." "Sir, I'm so glad I caught you." She was half running toward him, wringing her hands, her face a mask of believable terror. There's a huge water leak. In the staff lounge. It's the ceiling tile. It's just gushing." Hardwick's expression soured. "Gushing? Are you sure? The plumbing in this wing is new." "Yes, sir. I put a bucket under it, but it's going everywhere. It's going to ruin the new carpets." I didn't know who to call. She had him. Hardwick's one true love was the school's pristine, expensive infrastructure. The thought of water damage to his new carpets was more alarming than a fire. "For heaven's sake," he snapped. "Why are you standing here? Show me." He turned, following Susan as she scurried away, back down the hall. Robert watched them go. He watched until they rounded the corner. He was alone again in the dark. The only sound was the feed from the music room. The soft, tender, uninterrupted melody of Chopin. Robert let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. He looked at the monitor of the empty hallway. The woman he had blackmailed, the woman he had dismissed as a terrified, desperate non-entity, had just saved him. She had saved the entire operation. She hadn't done it for him. He was sure of that. She had done it for her daughter. And for his son. She had lied. Brilliantly. She had read the man, found his weakness, and exploited it in a matter of seconds. It was a move he would have respected at a board meeting. Robert Miller looked at the monitor showing the music room. He saw Ethan, peaceful and focused. He saw Chloe, listening intently. He had built this entire, fragile world on a foundation of power and fear. He had just discovered, to his profound shock, that he was not the only one holding it up. The night of the Legacy Gala arrived. The new Miller Center for Global Strategy was a cathedral of glass and steel. Robert had ensured it was flawless. It was filled with the low, confident hum of old money and new power. The air smelled of expensive perfume and catered canapes. Men in tuxedos and women in elegant gowns drifted across the marble floor. They sipped champagne and admired the architectural genius of Robert Miller. Robert was not admiring the architecture. He stood at the back of the grand hall, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a statue of perfect composure. Inside, his stomach was a cold, hard knot. For the first time in his professional life, he was not in control. He had built an empire by mastering variables. He predicted markets. He controlled supply chains. He dictated terms. Tonight, his most important merger, the joining of his son to the world, was completely out of his hands. It did not depend on market projections or hostile takeovers. It depended on the courage of a 10-year-old blind boy and the secret stories of a 10-year-old girl. He checked his watch. 8:50 p.m. Dean Hardwick was gliding through the crowd, his teeth gleaming. He was a shark in a tuxedo, sensing the blood in the water. The Hendersons, the night's biggest donors, were at his side. "Robert, a triumph," Hardwick said, his voice just loud enough for the Hendersons to hear. "The building is magnificent. They are completely floored. And now, for the main event. Our prodigy. I trust he is ready to secure the donation." The implication was clear. Ethan was the final piece of the transaction. "He is ready," Robert said, his voice flat. He hoped it was true. Backstage, in a small, windowless prep room, Ethan was not ready. The room was cramped. It smelled of dust, old curtains, and the faint, greasy odor of the catering kitchen. The distant noise of the crowd was a muffled, intimidating roar. It was all wrong. It was not his safe, quiet music room. He was sitting on a folding chair, his small hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. The tremor was back, worse than ever. "I can't," he whispered to Susan Walker, who was standing by the door. She had been given a backstage pass identifying her as staff. "I can't. There are too many sounds." His head was twitching, a small, bird-like motion, as he tried to process the sensory overload. "I hear forks on plates. I hear high heels clicking on the marble. It's too sharp. It's too loud. I can't find the music, Susan. I can't find the bubble." Susan's heart broke. She knelt in front of him, taking his icy hands. "Just breathe, Ethan. Like we practiced. Just breathe. You can do this." But he was already too far gone, lost in the noise. "No, I can't. I'm going to be sick." Chloe, who had been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward. She wore a simple blue dress. It was the first new dress Susan had been able to buy her in over a year. The anonymous grant money. The shame of it pricked at Susan, even now. Chloe walked over to Ethan. She didn't reach for his hands. She simply stood in front of him, close enough for him to feel her presence. "You're not in the dark," she said softly. "Yes, I am," Ethan whispered, his voice desperate. "I'm always in the dark. But now, the dark is full. It's full of people." "No," Chloe insisted. She reached out and tapped his shoulder, a simple, grounding touch. "You're not in the dark. You're just in the waiting part." Ethan's twitching head stilled. He turned toward her voice. "Waiting, like Uncle Elias. Remember?" Chloe's voice was calm and steady, a lighthouse in his panic. "He said you don't fight the dark. You don't fight the noise. You just make a little space for yourself inside it. A bubble. You just listen for your own breathing. And you wait for your moment. This isn't the doing part yet, Ethan. This is just the waiting." You're just waiting for the all clear. She reached out, and, for the first time, she put her small hand over his. Her hand was warm and steady. Find your bubble, she whispered. I'll be right here. In the wings. I'll be your all clear. When you hear them say your name, that's it. That's the signal. Ethan's trembling did not stop, but it quieted. He took a single, shuddering breath. He held onto her hand. It is my honor. Dean Hardwick's voice boomed from the stage, the sound sudden and painfully loud on the backstage speaker. To introduce the future of Crestwood, a true musical prodigy, Ethan Miller. Susan opened the door. The applause was a physical wall of sound. Ethan squeezed Chloe's hand once, hard. Then he let go. Okay, he whispered. He stood up. He was pale, but he was standing. He walked out of the dark, into the light. Robert watched his son, a small, solitary figure, walk to the center of the massive stage. He found the piano bench on his own, a skill he had practiced for months. He sat. A hush fell over the room. Several hundred pairs of eyes, the entire social and financial register of the city, were on his son. Ethan placed his hands on the keys. He did not play. He just waited. He sat for 1 second. 2, 3. Robert felt his own heart stop. Play, son. Just play. In the wings, Dean Hardwick was beginning to sweat. A confused murmur rippled through the front rows. For seconds. 5. Then, Ethan took a deep breath. He let it out. Boom. He struck the first chord. It was not a chord. It was the rumble. The giant's footstep. The sound of cannon fire. It was so loud, so full of unexpected power, a woman in the front row audibly gasped. The sound was not polite. It was an accusation. Robert watched, his face carved from stone. Ethan began to play. It was not a performance. It was a war. It was a story. The audience was transported. They heard the heavy, terrifying rumble of the left hand. Robert saw the Hendersons, who had been looking charmed, now leaned forward, their polite smiles gone. They were riveted. Then, the music shifted. The parade began. The bright, joyful whoosh filled the hall. The melody, fast and brilliant, was not just technically perfect, it was exuberant. It was the sound of a flag unfurling in a strong wind. Robert saw the audience relax, saw them smile. They felt the wind. He felt his own chest swell with a feeling so warm and bright it was painful. It was pride. But the story wasn't over. The music softened. It slowed. The final, heartbreaking melody began. The song for the ones who didn't come home. The hall was so quiet. Robert could hear the air moving through the vents. Ethan wasn't just playing a quiet part. He was playing the cost of the parade. When the final, tender note faded into silence, the room was completely still. No one breathed. They were all, for a moment, suspended in the bubble Ethan had created. Then, the applause began. It was not polite. It was a roar. A standing ovation. It was an emotional release. People were weeping. Robert Miller himself was clapping, his hands stinging, his vision strangely blurred. Dean Hardwick rushed the stage, his face saved, beaming with triumph. He raised Ethan's hand like a champion boxer. Ethan Miller, he shouted over the cheers. A true genius. His work with his tutor, Mr. Peterson, is a testament to the Crestwood standard. He handed the microphone to Ethan. Tell them, Ethan. Tell them about the hard work. Ethan held the microphone. He was trembling again from the applause. He stood small, facing the wall of noise. He was supposed to say thank you and walk off. That was the plan. But he could feel Chloe's presence in the wings. He heard Hardwick's words. Mr. Peterson. It was a lie. Thank you, he said, his small voice echoing through the hall. But Mr. Peterson didn't teach me this. The applause faltered, dying in patches. A confused silence spread. Hardwick's smile froze. Robert Miller stopped clapping. Mr. Peterson taught me the notes. Ethan continued, his voice finding strength. He was blind. He couldn't see the hundreds of horrified, confused faces. He was just talking. But my friend taught me the music. She taught me about the giant. And the whoosh, and the all clear. The audience was completely, terribly silent. A vast, empty canyon of silence. Hardwick looked like he had been struck by lightning. His face was pale. My friend, Chloe, Ethan said clearly. She taught me. All eyes, every donor, every parent, every board member, turned from the boy on the stage to the man at the back of the room. Robert Miller. This was his son. His gala. His name on the building. And his son had just, in front of everyone, publicly imploded the entire narrative. Robert felt the cold, familiar calculations returning. Damage control. Spin. Deny. Call the boy confused. Thank Peterson again. Get him off the stage. He looked at his son. He was standing alone on stage, holding a microphone, having just told the simple, unvarnished truth. He was braver than any man in the room. He was a man of honor, like the one in the stories. Robert Miller made a choice. It was not a calculation. It was a surrender. He walked onto the stage. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Every step was a decision. He walked past the horrified Dean Hardwick. He put his hand on his son's small, shaking shoulder. He took the microphone. My son is correct, Robert's voice boomed. The authority in it was absolute. I have been paying the wrong teacher. He turned his head. He looked directly into the wings, where Susan and Chloe were hiding, their faces pale with terror. Mrs. Walker, Robert called out. Chloe, please come out here. Susan froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. This was it. The end. She was going to be fired, humiliated. Go, Chloe whispered. He's not mad. Go. Trembling, Susan took her daughter's hand. They stepped out of the shadows. Two small figures, suddenly exposed in the blinding spotlight. The maid and the maid's daughter. Robert Miller looked at the crowd. This is Chloe Walker. She is the one who taught my son. The audience murmured. This was not on the program. For weeks, Robert continued, his voice clear and resonant. I have been monitoring their progress. The word monitoring hung in the air, a quiet confession of his spying. I have seen this child, who has had none of the advantages of this institution, teach my son with a wisdom I have never witnessed. She did not teach him what to play. She taught him why. He looked at Chloe. She taught him, using stories from her great-uncle, a war veteran, what it means to be brave, to be sad, to be joyful. He then looked at Susan, who was openly weeping. And her mother, Mrs. Susan Walker, has shown a loyalty and a courage that. He paused, his throat tight. It puts us all to shame. He turned back to the crowd. The twist was here. The moral. The Miller Center was built to foster global strategy, he said. But I see now that the most effective strategy is truth and connection. Therefore, the first official act of this center will be to create the Elias Thorne Music Grant. It will fund a new program based on this method, this storytelling, this feeling. He smiled. A real smile. It transformed his face. And its first recipient, with a full, permanent scholarship to Crestwood Academy, will be its founder, Chloe Walker. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. Susan let out a sob, a sound of such profound relief that the people in the front row heard it. And, Robert added, looking at Susan, the program will need an administrator, someone with proven courage and strategic skill. I trust Mrs. Walker will accept the position. The salary will be appropriate. The audience, stunned, finally understood. This was not a scandal. This was a redemption. The applause was deafening, 1,000 times louder than before. Later that night, the gala was over. The hall was empty, dark and quiet. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a clean, peaceful stillness. Robert, Ethan, Susan, and Chloe stood in the quiet, cavernous music room. The pact, born of blackmail, was now broken by the truth. Susan was the first to speak, her voice thick with emotion. Mr. Miller, a scholarship. A job. I don't know what to say. Why? After what you. Thank you. Robert looked at her. The arrogance was gone. He looked, for the first time, tired. Susan, what I did to you, the leverage I used, it was unforgivable. He said the words clearly. A confession. I thought I was solving a problem. I didn't realize I was breaking a family. You saved my son. And tonight, you saved me from myself. You have nothing to thank me for. It is I who am in your debt. He then knelt. It was an awkward, unfamiliar motion for him. He knelt in front of Chloe. The stories, he said, his voice quiet. Your great-uncle's stories. They are very powerful. He was a good man, Chloe said softly. My son, he lives in the dark, Robert said, his throat tight. He looked at the floor. I thought I had to give him weapons. Technique. Perfection. To fight his way out. I was trying to build him armor. He looked up at Chloe, his eyes shining. But you didn't give him a weapon. You gave him a light. He looked over at his own son, who was standing beside him, steady and calm. I would like to hear them, Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. The stories. All of them. From the beginning. If you would share them. Ethan smiled. He reached his hand out, not toward the piano, but toward the sound of his father's voice. Robert stood, and, for the first time, he didn't just pat his son's shoulder. He took his hand. Ethan leaned his head, just slightly, against his father's side. Chloe sat on the piano bench, opening her worn, cloth-bound journal. In the quiet music room, with the billionaire, the maid, and the blind boy all listening, she found the first page. My Uncle Elias. He said the bravest men he knew weren't the ones who charged. The music had stopped, but the story was just beginning. And for now, that's where we'll leave the story. My hope is that this was a welcome pause in your day, a chance to step away from the everyday and just get lost for a moment. I'd genuinely love to know where this story found you. Were you listening with a cup of tea, winding down for the night, or perhaps on a quiet commute? Share a glimpse of your scene in the comments. I truly do read every single one. If you enjoyed this and want to make sure we find each other again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We're always trying to make these stories better, so please feel free to share your feedback below as well. Thank you for spending this time with me.